Welcome everybody to today's webinar on behalf of the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce. We'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar with the title, What Does the Road to Recovery from COVID-19 Looks Like? Insights for Latin America from an Economic Expert Survey. Today's agenda, first we're going to have some welcome words from our president of the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Carla Klaus. Carla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for attending our invitation. I would like to start quoting Myra Kasim. She's a writer, and she said, "In the absence of information, we jump to the worst conclusions. Being informed is a good habit of every person that keeps us away from catastrophic thinking, which is precisely what is affecting us in these current times. The COVID-19 crisis forces all of us to adapt ways of working and to promote digital transformation to enhance online channels. What began as a measure of social distancing ended up allowing us to connect in other ways, but with greater reach. Thanks to this, we are having today these wonderful presentations of insights from 4 different economists and experts from Germany, Peru, and Brazil. Welcome, and thank you very much for your participation this morning. Since the first contact with Doreen from IFO to complete the World Economic Survey, we thought how interesting and valuable it would be to share all this information with our companies and partners. This COVID-19 pandemic crisis is without doubt one of the largest recessions in the world history that has significantly impacted most economies in the world. It caught us unprepared in all countries. Even if some warnings had been made about pandemics and this kind of crisis in some forums, nobody really took it seriously. And therefore, nobody was prepared. No government, no company. This led to the need to improvise decisions, measures, which are responsible for the different impacts that each country is now facing. The consequences at the company level have been in so many cases disastrous. The companies that have survived have done so because they managed to react with the necessary changes. Issues that have been planned for the future had to be accelerated, such as digitalization, sustainability, social standards, business continuity, risk management, customer approach, and better governance. Every manager or CEO or policymaker is responsible for knowing what is in the horizon that can impact their company or organization. In this way, they can be better prepared, because if there is one thing for sure, is that this will not be the last pandemic or the last crisis. This webinar of this morning is intended to help us understand and learn from others how they have analyzed the situation and how the crisis had been handled in different countries and regions, and of course, what the insights are. This information will allow us to draw important conclusions to make the right decisions to ride the wave of recovery. In an interconnected world, it is important to know what is going on so that we can be able to draw our own map. The German Chamber of Commerce is clear about its role in supporting our members and partners in providing these kind of approaches with organizations and institutions of high international prestige like IFO Institute, Fundación Getúlio Vargas in Brazil, and Apoyo Consultores in Peru. Thank you to all of you for your support and cooperation, and thank you to our audience this morning for attending our invitation. So please enjoy the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carla, for the words, introduction words. And right now we're going to start the webinar. Today's agenda, as you can see on your screens, we're going to start with the topic, what does the road to recovery from COVID-19 look like? That will be in charge of Dr. Doreen Bowmans. Then German economy during the Corona crisis in a global context, in charge of Stefan Sauer. What does Latin or Latin American recovery look like? In charge of Jose Carlos Saavedra. And last but not least, economic climate in Latin America and the situation in Brazil. Before giving them the hand, I would like to give a brief introduction to the panelists. First, Dr. Doreen Bowman. She is a survey specialist at the IFO Center for Macroeconomics and Surveys. She got her PhD at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, the United Kingdom. Her research work mainly focuses on international experts, surveys, and political economy. Stefan Sauer is a survey specialist also at the IFO Center for Macroeconomics and Surveys. He studied statistics at the University of Munich, and his research work mainly focuses on survey methods and business cycles. They are both from the IFO Institute. The IFO Institute is the result of the merge between the South German Institute for Economic Research with the Information and Research Center for Economic Observation, and it has over 70 years of history. Econpol Europe is the European network for economic and fiscal policy research. It is a network of 14 policy-oriented university and non-university research institutes across the 12 countries, who contribute scientific expertise to the discussion of the future design of the European Union. The network was founded in spring 2017 by the IFO Institute, along with 8 renowned European research institutes. Then we have Jose Carlos Saavedra. He is partner-in-chief economist at Apoyo Consultoría, where he is in charge of macroeconomic forecast and the identification of opportunities and risks that the economic environment possess for business. Prior to joining Apoyo, he held positions in the Peruvian Central Bank, academic and other private sector institutions. Jose Carlos holds a master's degree in economics from New York University. Apoyo Consultoría is the leading firm in business advisory services in Peru and a recognized strategic partner in decision-making processes. And Alosio Campello, Jr. is Superintendent for Statistics of the Getulio Vargas Foundation. He leads a team of 25 and more economists. He also provides technical assistance to the Economic Cycle Dating Committee of Brazil, CODACE, and is a member of the FGV, Short-Term Macroeconomic Monitoring Group. He has a master's degree in economics by the FGV and a diploma in economics for development by the Queen Mary. The Getulio Vargas Foundation was created in 1944 and is a Brazilian private higher education institution. It's a think tank and producer of statistics with a mission to foster Brazil's socio-economic development. The Brazilian Institute of Economics, or IBRE, is FGV's arm with the mission to produce and disseminate high-quality economic statistics and applied studies that are relevant to improving policies and private actions in Brazil. We would like to welcome them all. And just a few guidelines before we start. We would like for you to please put your microphones on mute during the presentation so that we can enjoy the information that we're receiving from our panelists. please turn off your cameras. The only cameras that are enabled are the speakers and the staff of the German Chamber of Commerce. And if you have a question during the presentation, you can write it down on the chat. And when we get to the Q&A segment, we will read the questions in order of receiving them. And if you have any additional comments or questions, you can either write them on the chat or you can click on the raise hand icon that is on the participants column on the right side of your screen. Thank you very much. And Dr. Bowmans, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raquel. And also thank you, Carla, for inviting us for presenting our study. And I'm very happy to be here today. And also thank you for the participants for attending. I will share my screen. So I will present the results of
Doreen, if you would like, you can turn off your camera because of the internet connection.
Okay. Which is not so good.
So.
No, it's okay.
It's okay? Okay.
You can
It got better, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I will present the results of the World Economic Survey that we conducted in August this year. The World Economic Survey has been run by the IFO Institute for almost 30 years. However, since last year, we changed the format a little bit, and or actually quite substantially. And we now have more ad hoc surveys rather than time series based. However, if you are interested in the time series, especially for Latin America, Aloisio is able to help you further, but he will discuss this in a minute as well, I think, or I'm certain. So who are the experts? They are economic experts all over the world. We keep the information of the names confidential. However, I can say that they work on a regular basis with economics or economic statistics, are normally based in the country for which they are reporting for, and around 60% of our experts have a PhD in economics. Our country coverage is, we have 110 countries covered by the World Economic Survey. However, participation rates for the number of experts in each country varies considerably, I can say. So for example, for the United States and Europe, we have quite good coverage. This is also due to, I think, the network of IFO, and that we have, or more people know the IFO Institute in either Europe or the US. However, we've been, also Latin America, it's quite good, I would say, but I think there's definitely room for improvement. So please feel free to contact us if you want to join our expert survey. So yeah. So for the latest study, we had around 950 experts that participated. And one of the most important questions we there asked was, what is the expected growth for GDP in 2020 and in 2021? Because as you all know, due to, or lots of governments in response to the COVID-19 crisis have introduced border shutdowns, travel restrictions, more general lockdowns with numerous social distancing measures. They might also have closed schools, shops, or services, or even also partly closed manufactories or factories. And of course, this led to an economic crisis all around the globe. As you can see from the results that we got from the survey, so these are this is an average of what all the experts in one country said they would think GDP would look like in 2020. We asked for the worst case scenario, but also the best case scenario and the most likely GDP for 2020. As you can see, due to this uncertainty, also because nobody knew whether a second wave will hit or if a vaccine will be developed, there's quite a big of a difference between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And what you can see here is that basically in all areas of the world in 2020, there's crisis or decline of GDP expected. However, this is the expectation that is that in 2021, this is relatively more positive. This is also the case for Latin America, where the most likely GDP, according to our experts in August, was -8%. This is a little bit better for Brazil, but I also think Aloisio and Jose Carlos can enlighten us more on that subject. What is striking is that for emerging and developing Asia, there the experts were relatively positive, and especially in China, they already think that the most likely growth for 2020 is 2.3%. So when can we expect recovery to go back to pre-crisis level? From the previous table, we saw that in 2021, recovery, like a positive GDP growth, is expected. However, when this growth is back to the pre-crisis level, will probably take a bit longer. So most experts either think this will be in 2022 or even maybe 2023. This is similar across the globe, and also for Latin America. It's more likely that to be back to before Corona hits the world economy, it will be 2022. So how exactly this recovery is going to look like is we try to figure this out by asking a question about how the slope of the recovery, according to the experts, should be. And what most of the people think is that a V-shaped recovery will happen due to that this is a pandemic that stopped economic life and activity, but there are no underlying economic problems. So therefore, maybe a V-shaped recovery is expected. However, when we ask the experts, most of them expected a U-shaped recovery. So that actually means that the recovery will be a bit slower and not as energetic as with a V-shaped. But also 31% of the expert expect how we called it a Nike swoosh recovery, and there are even 20% of the expert expect more of a V-shaped recovery with a double dip recession. And I think Stefan will also talk a little bit of this, if we can see this in Germany or not, but because of the problems with the second wave, it is perhaps also likely that a V-shaped recovery is going to happen. However, if there's not a V-shaped recovery, then there are some underlying problems due to this stop of economic activity, which maybe also have an impact on what can we expect on or for the potential GDP, or how GDP will develop in the future. And that's why we asked a question about what type of effect will this be on the long-term impact? Will there be no effect? And level impact, that growth will be at the same angle, but at a different level, so to say? Or will there actually be an angle effect that growth will be less in the coming years? Or combined, will there be level and growth? So for Brazil, most experts actually expect a level and growth effect. So this impacts GDP quite considerably. For the United States, they think that it will have a one-term impact, so a level effect, but then growth will continue on the same level as it did before. And in European countries, that's also by the majority expected. However, there are really lots of differences here across the countries. Yeah, so now Stefan will discuss more the German case and go more in depth. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dorine. I will share my screen first, and then I will try to give a brief overview about what is happening in the German economy at the moment, and trying to put it in also in a global context. So that's the wrong slide already. Yeah. So what we are seeing here is one of the most important indicators for the German economy. It's from the IFO business survey, where we ask about 9,000 companies every month about the assessment of their current business situation, and also about business expectations for the next month. And what we see here is a strong decline of business climate in March and April, followed by a good recovery in the summer months. Especially expectations were already pretty optimistic. Only the current situation wasn't back to pre-crisis level. It already almost looked like a V-shaped recovery that Dorine talked about. But now that the second wave also hit in Germany, we see another decline since October, and especially the expectations. And now it's looking more like a W-shaped recovery, with a decline not as strong as in March and April now, but the next months will show how the pandemic will continue, and when the vaccine will be here finally. So we have also a few other Corona-related questions in our monthly survey, and we asked the companies about the negative effects of the Corona crisis, and we see it here for different sectors. And manufacturing was hit hardest at the beginning of the crisis, but now the black line here. But now the negative effects are getting considerably less in.
Stefan, we lost.
Microphone muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what you heard now and what not.
It was just for a few minutes.
The last slide. Yes.
Okay. So I will start again the slide. We asked companies about negative effects of the pandemic, and we see how it developed here from April. At the beginning, manufacturing was hit pretty hard by the crisis, and there were a lot of negative effects. But now here, the black line, we see that the negative effects got already less. And in service sector, on the other side, we see now from October again more negative effects because of some lockdown measures like closing hotels or restaurants, and yeah. And also in retailing, we had at the beginning all shops closed, or a lot of shops closed. And during the summer months, we had here almost no negative effects anymore. But then also now in November, it got already a bit more. And I think in the next weeks, we will have again shops closed here after Christmas, or maybe even already before. So we are already also expecting here more negative effects. But what are these negative effects for companies? And we asked the companies in which areas they see the biggest problems. And we also asked the same questions to our experts in the expert survey, where they see the biggest problems in their country. And for Germany, we asked it in November. And the biggest problem area is our government regulations. And that is mainly in the sectors where the lockdown measures are hardest, like again, hotels or restaurants. But also domestic sales are a big issue. Here, nevertheless, it differs through sectors. For example, manufacturing, the companies, they see there are more problems in foreign sales than in domestic sales. And we saw the same in our expert survey, where European experts stated that foreign sales are the biggest problems during this crisis. For Latin America, we saw the complete opposite. Their most experts stated that foreign sales are not the biggest problem, but domestic sales are a far bigger issue for companies. But will these problems lead to an insolvency wave? And we asked our participating companies in June and also in November if they see their existence threatened by the crisis. And what we see here is that in November the share is a bit smaller than in June, but still 15% of all companies stated that they see their existence threatened. And this again differs through sectors, with biggest share in the service sector. And here, especially again, hotels and restaurants and also tourism, we see there almost 80% of all companies saying that they are in risk of insolvency. And we asked the same in our expert survey, and which sectors have the highest risk of insolvencies for companies. And almost everywhere around the globe, and also in Latin America, experts said that the tourism sector and the hotel and restaurant sector have the highest risk for insolvencies. And yeah, in Germany we don't have an insolvency wave yet, but we will see what happens next year. And let me already conclude with a few policy measures. We ask in our expert survey which policy measures experts assess as the most effective. We saw a lot of different stimulus packages all around the globe in different countries. And also experts have different opinions in different parts of the world. So in general, the most effective measure is emergency liquidity assistance to small businesses. But for example, in Latin America, improvements to the healthcare system are assessed as the most effective measures. And let me briefly talk about the next 2 points here. Tax deferrals and short-time work, because we also have here data from our business survey. For tax deferrals is also assessed from the experts as a very effective measure. And in Germany, 40% of the companies that participated in our survey stated that they want to make use of tax deferrals. And to short time work, we have also asked about short-time work in our business survey, and from that we could estimate the number of persons in short-time work. And in May we had 5.7 million persons in Germany in short-time work, and now in November there were still 2 million people in short-time work. So short-time work means that that workers work less hours and get paid less, but the state is making up for the lost wages. So this is a very good measure to avoid bankruptcies and also to help saving jobs, at least in the short run. And the last point that I can point out here is the interest rates cuts. In Latin America, we have a pretty high effectiveness stated by the or its experts stated that it's a very important measure, while in Europe experts didn't feel that this would be a good option for European countries. So that was it from my side, and maybe Jose Carlos and Aloisio can give a better insight for Latin America on a few of these topics. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's my turn to share the presentation. And just give me a second to share my screen. Please confirm that you're seeing my presentation. Okay, yes. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to AHK and IFO for allowing me to share with you our views about the Latin American economy, the impact of the COVID crisis, and how we see the recovery from now on. And let me just start with the presentation. Latin America has been one of the regions, the hardest hit regions in the world by COVID-19. And that is the case in terms of number of cases, but also in terms of the size of the GDP falls that we have seen. And one can think about many reasons behind this fact, but we think that an important one was the general lack of good health systems in the region. It's something that just appeared in the survey that Stefan was mentioning. Just to give you an example, in the left-hand side of these slides, you can see the different capacity installed in the health systems in different countries. The ICU beds per capita in USA and Germany, of course, is important, but it's not the case for other Latin American countries. In terms of beds per 100,000 inhabitants, in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, Peru, the number is less than 2, while in the USA and Germany, it's more than 25. So given the lack of good health systems, the only tool that governments had to fight against the spread of the COVID was to impose really strict restrictions on mobility and the operation of companies compared to other countries in the world. You can see that in the other graph that shows the relationship between how strict the restrictions were and how deep were the GDP falls in each country. And as you can see, Peru, the country where am I right now, it stands out because Peru experienced one of the deepest falls in GDP in the second quarter because we implemented one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. And unfortunately, these restrictions, these strict lockdowns, and the severe impact on GDP, that was not enough to limit the spread of the virus effectively. Lockdowns were not particularly effective in Latin America. For instance, Peru, as I just mentioned, implemented one of the strictest lockdowns and experienced one of the deepest falls in GDP, also experienced or registered one of the highest numbers of deaths per capita in the world. And so why is that? What is the reason behind that? And we think that informality, the high levels of informality in Latin American countries is a good explanation of that. Informality challenged the social distance strategy. As you can see in this slide, many countries like Nicaragua, Honduras, Peru, Guatemala, El Salvador, all of them have really high levels of informality in terms of the share of workers that works in informality. What is informality? Informality. It's the number of workers that work without any contract. And usually in Latin America, that means without any social protection. It doesn't mean they're illegal. They mean that they work in a regular basis in restaurants or factories, but without any contract. They are not registered. Usually they are low paid, so most of them don't have savings, proper access to credit, and usually they make their money in a daily basis. So they were forbidden to work, but the government could not transfer their money. It was not like in Germany with Kurzarbeit or other programs, no. So it was very difficult for them to stop working. The government implemented a huge cash transfer program, but it was very difficult to identify the households because they were not in any database and they didn't have any bank account. I don't know. I'm talking about the Peruvian experience, but I'm pretty sure that it was the case in other Latin American countries as well. So informality had a negative multiplier effect in this crisis. And also, it's something that Stefan mentioned before, the highly dependence of some countries on sectors like travel, tourism, hospitality is something that affected some economies more than others and will certainly affect the road to recovery because those sectors are expected to recover slowly from now on. So this social, crisis had a negative social impact, and that was huge. Latin America has been one region in which poverty rates and inequality declined systematically over the last decades. But this has changed this year. Poverty rates are expected to increase significantly in many countries, back to levels not seen in one decade. And also inequality is expected to rise again after a long period of improvement. This crisis has affected, as I mentioned, more dramatically informal and low-income workers, while white-collar, formal, and skilled workers have been less affected. Added to this, teleworking and online schooling we think will probably increase inequality in this region. In general, only one third of Latin American citizens, one third of Latin American citizens don't have access to internet, and that number is 12% in OECD countries. and more or less 45–46% of children between 5 to 12 years old in Latin America live in home without internet access. And more or less 3 out of 4 workers cannot work from home. They cannot do home office because the type of the work they have, or because they don't have internet access. So in general, the lack of access to internet is a problem, but when you look at a huge difference in internet access between the poorest and the richest households in the region, it's clear that some families were able to deal with this situation better than others. And we think this will create an increase in inequality in the short term and in the long term as well. So I have argued that the COVID pandemic has affected the region particularly hard because of some structural problems in the health system, in the labor market, connectivity, and because of the unequal way some problems affected the population. But now I would like to talk about the recovery. In many countries, one can say that the worst of this crisis is behind in terms of the number of cases or in terms of the recovery so far. No, in many countries after the hardest part of the lockdowns. But the path to recovery is going to be challenging. That is our opinion. And that is why we think that recovery in the region is going to be slow and uneven. We think that the differences between the pace of the recovery in different countries will depend on 4 factors. First, it will depend on how each country takes advantage of the fast expected recovery in developed economies with the deployment of the vaccines and deployment of fiscal supports. And actually, many Latin American countries are facing a relatively good external environment with high commodity prices, and that applies to many countries. Remittances, which I understand are important for El Salvador, for example, are growing again. Interest rates in general are very low. So if the countries are able to take advantage of this situation, the recovery could be faster than others. Second, it's important to see how well each country avoids another wave of COVID cases. Unfortunately, we now see some countries where the number of cases is increasing again. Aloysia, you correct me later if I'm wrong, but I think Brazil is one of them. Mexico as well. I don't know if in some Central American countries is the same. But at this point, it's crucial for each country to secure enough vaccines doses for their population. Something that, as you can see in the graph, is yet to be seen. We are not seeing right now that we are seeing that some Latin American countries are far behind other countries in order to secure enough number of vaccines. Look at these differences. Peru, El Salvador have secured vaccines only for 38% of the population so far, while USA, France, Germany, Italy, and others for more than 100% of the population. So that will create a lot of differences if this difference in vaccine contracts holds. And of course, the distribution of the vaccine poses great logistical challenge, and that's also a source of difference, I think, in the road to recovery from now on. Third, and I think this is the most important one, the most important factor, is that this crisis has affected tax collection and urged governments to increase public expenditures. All of this created huge fiscal deficits and a rapid increase in public debt to levels not seen in a very long time. Countries with high levels of debt like Brazil, Argentina, El Salvador will probably face higher financing costs and will need to reduce public expenditures and increase taxes. These fiscal adjustments will certainly slow the pace of recovery in some countries more than others. For instance, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, El Salvador, I think, issued a bond, a 30-year bond this year at an interest rate of 9%, while Peru just issued a bond, a 100-year bond, at interest rate of 3%. So these differences that depend on the fiscal position in each country will create a lot of differences in the pace of recovery for the next few quarters or even years. And finally, we think that the road to recovery in some countries will be marked by rising social conflicts because of depressed wages, higher inequality, and stronger demands for better social protection in a context in which government need to reduce their fiscal deficits will probably create conflicts and the need to tough political decisions. So that was one of the reasons we think some countries will recover slower than others. All these factors will make the recovery and as a general is lower than in other regions and uneven among countries. Some countries are expected to rebound to pre-crisis GDP levels faster than others. Stefan and Doreen talked about that before. We expect Peru or Chile to rebound faster than others because their fiscal constraints are less problematic than others. While other countries like El Salvador are expected to recover slower after a decline of more or less 7%. In general, we expect a recovery of around 2.8% in 2021. And yet to finalize, some people say that the crisis, every crisis comes with an opportunity. I don't know if that's true, but if that's true, we think that the opportunity after this crisis is to resume the reform agenda in many countries that is needed to improve the competitiveness in our countries. As a region, we are far behind other regions in the world, and there are some, fortunately, there are some low-hanging fruits in order to improve productivity, that is improving infrastructure with PPP programs and the improving in the business environment in general with reducing red tape and bureaucracy, etc. And I think that's very important to recover in this situation because it's the way out of this crisis is growing faster and in that way to create fiscal revenues needed to the fiscal consolidation that is urgently needed in many countries. So that's it, and thank you for allowing me to share these thoughts with you. I think Alessia, it's your turn to share your presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Jose Carlos, for your presentation. It was really good. And now we have Aloisio Campello with a presentation, Economic Climate in Latin America and the Situation in Brazil.
You're on mute, Aloisio.
So thanks AHK for the invitation, and also Doreen and IFO for inviting for this webinar. So you can see the presentation. Okay, Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the economic climate in Latin America because we kind of inherited from IFO a survey that is a continuous survey that follows economic developments and especially the economic cycle in Latin America. It's a survey with experts, and I'll use mainly this survey as a source to try to complement what the other panelists have said, to try to give another view. First of all, let me just, take my time here. First of all, I'd like to say that if we take a look at the economic climate in Latin America, we see that it's still below the average, the historical average. And what are these figures here? They are balances of questions. I mean, there are qualitative answers if the present situation and the expectations are good or will improve, minus the percent of experts that say that it's bad or will decrease. So we have questions related to the present situation and expectations, and we see that the balance is negative at the moment. It's climbing a little bit to minus 39. That means that we have in Latin America 39 more people saying that the situation is bad or pessimistic, but I mean, that's not the case when we see the difference, the distance between the present situation and the expectations. So what we have here, we have the present situation in the beginning of the fourth quarter in 2020 is still very bad. It's evaluated by experts. It's a sample that it's a bit similar to what Doreen talked about, the IFO Institute, people who work in consultants or in universities. Most of them are PhDs answering about their economy, and they say that the present situation is still bad, so it's minus 93. But the expectations after the fall in the surprisingly, with the surprise of the pandemic, the expectations are becoming more optimistic. So of course it cannot get worse than it is. Mostly that's the point regarding expectations. Then we have the economic climates in selected countries. I would not mention these countries. I would just say that there are many differences. The impact in terms of economic climate is different in different countries. There are countries that are suffering more with the pandemic and in their economy or in their health, and but came from with better macro fundamentals, and thus the expectations are better now. And there are countries that are not forecasting strong developments in the following quarters. There are countries with political instability and so on. So here we have that. I mean, Paraguay and Uruguay, we will see many other pictures here, not too many, but some. We will see that Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile are bound to recover from the crisis. And then we will see Ecuador, Mexico, and some other countries will appear in different tables here. When we look at the present situation and the expectations opened by countries, and here again, I won't talk about specific countries, but I would just show you that the present situation is bad in almost any country. We are mentioning these countries because these are the countries that we have larger number of experts. We feel that we feel more comfortable to publish it as a statistics that is trustable. But our sample also has 1/4 of the sample is from countries in Central America and Mexico. And we even count with your help to improve this sample because we have few countries, especially in Central America. The sample for Mexico is okay. That's why Mexico is there. But I would say that the present situation is bad to all countries, although we have this only this sample here, but the expectations are quite heterogeneous. We see that Paraguay, every expert we consulted in Paraguay is optimistic that in the next 6 months the situation will improve, and then we as we go down we reach Argentina, Mexico, and Ecuador, where people are not that optimistic. And we see that the factors that affect expectations are mainly the macro fundamentals. I mean, countries that were growing before the crisis, that have better fiscal situation, that control inflation and so on. Of course, the expectations now, it seems that they seem to be better. This is a factor that affects. Also, the course of pandemics, is we still have problems, and we still have problems if we take into account that the first semester of 2021 will be a semester where the vaccines will start to arrive and the situation is going to improve. But as Jose showed us, there are different countries have different situations. Here in Brazil, for instance, we have a political fight where the presidents at the federal level, there is not too much has been done, but at the level of some states, especially the state of São Paulo, which is a state that answers for 40% of Brazilian GDP, there is a partnership with the local scientific institute from São Paulo has a partnership with a Chinese company which produces the vaccine CoronaVac. So there is a fight because the federal government says that people are afraid that the agency, the health agency, may not approve the vaccine, although it has been tested and so on. So that's just an example to show that it's not simple to understand what may happen regarding recovery in 2021 in different countries in Latin America. We see that some countries have a second wave, but it's really not simple, and the vaccines are the most important point now to follow. And then we have the fiscal situation. For some countries is not very good, for others is more comfortable. Some countries injected lots of money in their economy to avoid GDP to fall further, and some countries did not. Political stability, of course, there are countries which impeached presidents in 2020, and some countries where there are lots of riots and problems, as in Chile, and we have countries that are more solid and less political uncertainty. And then we would come to this point that as we connect all these things, uncertainty is very important to follow what will happen, and then uncertainty affecting confidence. Here we have the GDP growth in 2019, 20, and 21. As we see lots of differences in the last column, the accumulated growth we have in Guatemala and Paraguay. Maybe 2020 and 21 we will have a positive situation, but most of the countries a negative situation. Here we can see that the countries that in 2019 had a better situation usually also having a better performance in the combined 2020 and 2021. These are figures from the IMF. Of course, I would trust Jose forecasts more for Peru and mine forecasts for Brazil, but it's just to have a quick overview, of course. And then here we have some, we can see, I will not comment that much because that would take too much time, but here we have problems that are evaluated as relevant by the experts in each country. And then in the first column, we can see which are the problems that were most quoted in all of Latin America. And then we see that lack of innovation was mentioned by 91% of the experts, inadequate infrastructure by 89, corruption by 88. But then we have differences. In Chile and Uruguay, corruption and inadequate infrastructure is not a problem. And on the bottom of the table, we have the lack of credibility in central bank policy to be a problem only in Argentina. They can control inflation. That's a big problem for Argentina, but not for other countries. So we can see that we have lots of heterogeneity, and we see that the fiscal situation is also a problem for some countries, but not for others. 100% in Ecuador think that the inefficient debit management is a problem. I'll have a quick, I'll try to be as fast as I can because I'm taking too long. I'm sorry about that. But to understand Brazil, first of all, we need to know that Brazil had a very good moment in the first decade of this century. And then we had problems, especially fiscal deterioration. And we had this, the car wash operation, which was a fight against corruption operation that involved many people from the government, from top positions in the government, and that affected growth as well, but especially worsening of the macro fundamentals. Here we have the growth of Brazil in white, in blue, sorry, and the growth of the rest of Latin America, shall we say, Latin America ex-Brazil in the orange bar. And then we see that from 2005 and 2012, the average growth from Brazil was almost the same as in Latin America. And then in the last 7 years, Latin America grew by 2.2% and Brazil 0. We had a very idiosyncratic crisis. And then we have these two covers from The Economist at the top of the page. We can see that The Economist in 2009 had the crisis as a rocket. And then in 2013, we had Christ falling. The Economist perceived that Brazil was in different moments. But what will happen to Brazil after the crisis? We see, according to our projections, we will have a V-Nike type of recovery, which doesn't look quite bad, when we will see why. I'll try to be quick here. First of all, it's not changing, sorry. First of all, there was a big help from governments. Here we have, I'll leave this for you so you can take a look later on and you can see this information. This is a paper by Elgin Bosberg and Yellerman from 2020. They collected information from many different databases. It's a nice work. And here we say that the fiscal stimuli as percent of GDP in different countries and in the whole world, here we are considering the fiscal measures affecting government accounts. And then we see that as a median in 168 countries, the fiscal measures answered for 4%, the second column. In the average, the median of Latin America, 2.1%. In Brazil, 12%. And then in Chile, also a very high figure. So that was, we had expenditure, money given for low-income people, 60 million people, almost 1/3 of the population, 1/4 of the population receiving money for staying home in the beginning, but then for the rest of the year. Only in this last quarter that this money to informal workers and low-income workers reduced a little bit. And now we will see what will happen in next year. So that's one of the reasons Brazil was not so bad. Here we can see that the economic uncertainty, here's a measure using media information. We collect information and we have a text analysis to see, we see that the pandemic uncertainty rose a lot and it's not falling. But what I want to say is that here we have the political uncertainty uncertainty related to politics, the orange line. We can see that from 2014 until last year, the political uncertainty was above the other line, which is the fiscal uncertainty. But now the fiscal uncertainty is taking a bit more time to reduce. So that's a problem for us. Of course, as Jose showed, our debt is now over 100% of GDP. Business confidence recovers, but consumers are frightened. This is something that is happening in many places. Specifically in Brazil, the manufacturing confidence is a very nice shape now. With all this money that entered the economy, the manufacturing industry is even having problems to deliver some products because of the demand became strong for their level of capacity, and this is also impacting inflation somehow. But consumers are not optimistic, and the services sector is of course, this is November, and the services sector is falling, so the distance is increasing. So I'll finalize by saying that about Brazil, that despite what people see in the world, the negationist stance of the federal government regarding the COVID pandemic, the economic emergency package was remarkably strong, and the economy was not that bad this year, but the uncertainty is bound to remain very high for the following years. We have problem with we have no more room for emergency packages next year. We have a huge debt, when we even have inflation, which I've seen that is not a problem for most of the countries in Latin America, but we had a huge devaluation against the dollar, more than in other emerging economies, and at the same time, terms of trade increased. Lots of our commodities, the commodities we export went up, so we have inflation now. The government plans to tackle this by privatizing companies and using international reserves, which are still big, to reduce debt burden. I'm not sure if that will work, because nobody knows exactly what the president thinks, and sometimes he goes against the Minister of Economy. So there are lots of uncertainties that I think that Brazil will underperform against other countries in Latin America still for the next couple of years. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aloisio, for your contribution. And thank you to all the panelists for that valuable information that we received from you guys. Before moving forward to the Q&A, to the questions and answer segment, we would like to take a couple of minutes to do a quick poll about the webinar. So on your screens, you will see 3 questions. So we kindly ask your help if you can answer the questions just to get to know a little bit about your preference. The last question is, would you like to participate in upcoming IFO and FGV surveys? This is very important because since this is an economic survey for Latin America, it will be very good and very valuable, all the input that countries such as Central America, not only El Salvador, will give to this evaluation. It will be more enriching and we will have more information. So we kindly ask your support in answering these questions before moving forward again.
Maybe I can add a little bit to the surveys that I think also Aloisio will give you the data that compare from all the experts together, will provide them also to the participants. And I think even Aloisio has them in Spanish. We would very much welcome you also to participate in our IFO survey. We only publish our results in English, but I guess that's also not a problem. And of course, with the indicators that Aloisio and Stefan already also showed, you will get an early indicator for GDP. Like normally, GDP takes quite a long time to officially is known, but with this kind of indicators, you get an early access and you have early information on where where the economy is heading. So I think this is beneficial also, yeah, for you.
Yes, exactly. So we have a couple of minutes more or minutes left for the polling before we enter our questions and answers segment. So we really appreciate for the participants if they can answer the polling. Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody that answered the poll. And right now we will continue with our questions and answers. During the presentation, we had a couple of questions, I'm sorry. The first one comes from the Dominican Republic. And the question for all the panelists is, what is the reason that the construction sector does not consider the crisis to be threatening to the company existence?
I can maybe answer that for Germany. So in Germany, the construction sector didn't feel that much of negative effects of the whole crisis. We have a pretty good situation for the construction sector, and maybe even a boom of construction here. So that's why there are not so many firms with negative effects, and also only a few companies that see their existence threatened by the crisis.
Maybe I can add.
That maybe I can add. Oh, sorry, Doreen.
No, go ahead. You go.
No, maybe I can add something. Maybe I mean the construction sector has a very long type of cycle. They take a lot of time to build. That's one point. That and people, as in many countries, the interest rates went down. Maybe some people are trying to look at real assets as a form to investments, as a form of investment from one side. Also, there is this thing of the home office. People are valuing staying in larger houses as well. So in some regions, we see, especially in Brazil, people looking for more for larger apartments or houses. I mean, there are some specific reasons why I think that the construction sector may not be, of course, in different countries you have different situations, but there are some reasons that in many countries the construction sector is not having a bad situation. But actually, I would say that in most of the world, the sector that is having a better performance is the manufacturing industry.
Doreen, I think you wanted to complement something.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I think it was mostly covered by Aloisio as well. I guess the contracts that construction firms get go over a longer period of time, so they plan maybe also 1 or 2 years ahead ahead, and that's why maybe the business climate or construction firms haven't been affected that much as well.
Yeah, in the Peruvian case is the same as you mentioned, a combination of low interest rates, a huge demand for public works as well. And also something very interesting in the case of Peru was that we have seen a surge in investment made by own families. We call it auto construction. So families build their own houses or improve their own houses. Unfortunately, those houses are not always well designed or secure, but it was the way for families to deal with the pandemic, in the sense that for example, some members of the families that used to live alone, they couldn't afford rents, so they went back to the nucleus of the family and they needed to improve the conditions in the house. So actually, that thing that looks tiny, it is huge in Peru. So that explained a big part of the surge in the construction sector.
Okay, thank you very much to all of your answers. And we have another question also from the Dominican Republic. What should be the main sector to be considered by governments to improve resilience of companies? How to prepare companies for future crisis moments?
It's a good question. I think it also depends on different countries, what the main construction or like which area of the economy has been worst hit, but also where is the main productivity, what's the biggest source for GDP. Yes.
Yeah, it's quite different, Raquel. The point is that the economic cycles are always surprising. Once that there was a famous, I think he was a political scientist that said that talked about the end of history because we had a long period of growth. There were no more recessions, and then came 2008, the financial crisis. There was a problem related to derivatives in the United States and Europe, and then we had other crises or menaces of crisis. It was a long recovery from 2008 to 2009, and now we have this crisis. Now we are PhDs in pandemic, what to do in pandemic. Of course, for firms are taking lots of measures, but they cannot do everything. Governments must act as well in this case.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, those were all the questions that we received through the chat. I would like to invite the participants, if they have any further questions or comments that you would like to make to our panelists, please feel free to make them. You can click on the raise hand icon, or you can unmute the microphone and ask your question.
Maybe, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah. So I was wondering, for in Latin America, if there the possibility of short-term work would be realistic, or maybe in Brazil or in Peru, or even people from the audience, because I think in Europe, or especially also in Germany, it's been seen as one of the policies that work the most, or at least in the short term, to secure the job, so that if people can go back to work, the economy is as it was relatively before. But I don't know how this is perceived in other countries, and I was just wondering if you can share some insights there.
Jose?
Yeah, I will go first. In the case of Peru, that kind of policy would be very beneficial for many companies. But the problem is that would only benefit to the formal sector of the job market. And that's it. In the case of Peru, that is only 30% of all the workers in the country. So, and the formal workers were not the most affected. They were affected, but they were not the most affected. So in the case of Peru, the policy that was implemented in order to reach the informal sector was something that Aloisio mentioned in Brazil. The government transferred money to families directly in order to stay at home. Actually, that bonus, the transfer bonus, applied to 9 9 million households in Peru. And that's, in Peru, there are a little bit more than 9 million households. So it's a universal bonus. At the beginning, it was designed only for half of the number of households in Peru, but then it was expanded. So the way we dealt with informality was to giving bonuses to families, and in the formal sector, it was designed a subsidy for employment, a temporary subsidy. But I think the policy you mentioned would fit well, but only for the formal sector.
Maybe I can say something. I don't know, Raquel, about for Brazil.
Please, Aloysia.
Yeah, just we didn't have this type of measure, Doreen, but we had a labor reform 2 years ago during the former President Temer, before Bolsonaro. That was a kind of liberalizing reform. So we lots of different forms of hiring people were allowed. So. But I think that this wouldn't make too much difference in Brazil, because the sectors that what we had was the government subsidized workers with temporarily reduced contracts. So the person that was already hired could work for, say, half the number of hours that he was working before. The government compensated that. The firm could reduce wage, but the government compensated that, and also some workers could have their contract suspended for some months. And the thing is that the government obliged the firms that enter this type of benefit to have a type of quarantine afterwards. So they received this type of help to reduce the time, the working hours, or suspend contracts for a while. But then the firm had to keep the employee for a while after that. And that's one of the things that people are concerned with in Brazil now, because people are afraid of unemployment, because this quarantine period will end in the first quarter of all firms that ask for help will be on their own, say at the end of the first quarter 2021. And then lots of firms, especially in the services sector, are saying that they may have to adjust the total people, the number of people employed. That's it.
Well, I don't know if there are some additional comments from the participants or panelists.
I may say something. Yes, sorry.
Yes, please.
No, no, don't worry. Well, I just want to add the situation of the Dominican Republic. Here, the government reacted very fast and introduced a program which called FASE. So also to assure that the companies won't have to cancel that much of employees when in March the lockdown started here. This was really helpful. Still, it's working till the end of the year. Mainly here, the service sector with the tourism, was highly affected. And this, what the hotel manager and those commented, was a real helpful thing to do. By law, we don't have a situation like in Germany with short-term working, Kurzarbeit, like we call it. So that was a good solution. Also, they started to affiliate to the health system those informal workers, so that they can get the health assistant, the basic health assistant with the assurance So this is something helpful. We will see how the government will be able to continue next year some of those measurements, just for completing the question from Doreen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted also to add the case of El Salvador. We have more or less the same case as Peru, Jose Carlos, that we have 90% of our economy is informal, of our jobs are informal. And the measure was the same. The government approved a subsidy for 2 months to pay the workers. And but what is very important is that when we started again, when the economy was reopened, companies have shown good biosecurity plans and had shown that the source of contagion was not in the companies. So we could overcome the situation and recover a little bit of the damage of the economy by opening the industries. And it is important because the type of jobs that we have, not all of them, as you said in your presentations, can adapt well to home office alternatives. So for our economies, it's very important to keep the industries. And we have shown that through good biosecurity plans, how we cope very good with the pandemic. That's from the side of El Salvador.
Thank you very much, Carla. I would like to ask once again the participants if they have additional comments or questions. They are free to ask them right now, or we can continue with the webinar. Okay, so well, thank you very much for that valuable input about the situation and how the economic impact has affected not only Latin American countries, but also Germany and the whole Europe. So thank you very much once again for all the information. On behalf of the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce, we would like to extend an invitation to all the audience and yourself, dearest panelists, to visit our digital magazine, which is ahkactuel.com. That is our digital magazine for the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce. There we have articles and news regarding what is happening not only in El Salvador and in the Central American region, but also some interesting news and trends about Germany and the whole Latin America. And feel free to contact us, and we would like to see your brand on our magazine. So please enter the website and visit and read our magazine. Also, we would like to comment that as the German Chamber of Commerce here in El Salvador, we are part of one of the largest networks of German chambers worldwide. We are over 140 German chambers worldwide with representation in 92 countries of the world. And the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce is member of the German Chamber of Commerce and Industry for Central America and the Caribbean. So here are the contact information for all the chambers in Central America, and we would love to talk to you, share a little virtual coffee, and hear about you, what is going on your countries, in your countries, what is going on with your industry, and see how the German Chamber of Commerce can be of help to you and improve and expand your business to other countries in the world. Once again, we would like to thank you for the participation. And here on the last banner, you will see the links to all the institutions represented by the distinguished panelists that we have today. We have the Econpol Europe, IFO Institute, Apoyo Consultoría, and Getulio Vargas Foundation. So thank you very much, everybody, for your assistance. Distinguished panelists, thank you very much for your time, your information, and your expertise. Carla, thank you very much for your words and your presence in our webinar. Dearest participants, thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Thank you on behalf of the German Salvadorian Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much to all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.